celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Stirling Faux on AM 650.
Welcome back to the program. Our guest in studio today is Blair Mantin from Sands & Associates, Trustees in Bankruptcy. On Boomer Life today, we're talking about debt, particularly as it applies to, well, us, Blair, boomers. You said in our first segment, sometimes you encounter people who come to see you for consultation, etc., who say, I've had your number, actually, for a year or more. I just really have finally just this week got around to calling you. Why would someone have the means and access to a helpful professional like yourself and yet balk at the idea of seeking your services for that period of time? Let's talk about the stigma of insolvency and how people feel about. There's a shame attached to this.
Yeah.
It's to be indebted and incapable of paying your debts is a public admission of failure. I can't cut the mustard. I'm not up to par. Somehow or another, that makes me a lesser human being. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Yeah, 100%. The number one factor I think that really discourages people from making that first call is fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear that the trustee is going to be like everybody else who they've had to deal with their debts.
Right.
So what you just said about, you're not cutting the mustard, you're a bad person, morally this is a bad thing, that's exactly what the collection agents are saying to these people day in, day out. They're phoning them from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Right.
Some of them specialize in fear, intimidation, and dirty tricks, saying things that aren't true, telling people their family's going to be responsible for their debts, they're a bad person for not honoring their obligations.
Right.
Some people think when they walk into a trustee's office, they're going to get judged, they're not going to be treated with respect, and nobody's going to listen to them and empathize.
Oh, here
with them.
comes another flake who can't pay his bloody bills. Oh, geez. Take a number, sit down. I mean, that's the way you've been treated for the last umpteen period of time. Are these nasty calls from people who shriek and scream at you on the phone, is that legal?
Well, I guess there's a broad spectrum of what's legal and what's not.
Because they can be really vicious.
Oh, definitely. They will say things that's not true. They will threaten to sue you. They'll threaten 9,000 out of 10,000 people, but they'll sue 1 out of 10,000 people.
Right.
So there's a lot of things they will say that aren't true. But at the end of the day, you've still got this problem. And the person on the other end of the phone is just, their objectives are to get as much repayment of that debt as possible,
right,
notwithstanding how it impacts you personally.
Right.
So their objectives are different than yours, and they're not your friends at the end of the day. So I think people, again, fear that coming into a trustee's office is going to be like speaking with a collection agent.
Right.
Or when they walk into a trustee's office, they're going to walk out bankrupt. All their friends are going to know about it. I'm going to take the shirt off their back, and they're never going to get credit again for the rest of their lives. So there's so many misconceptions and so much fear. The number one thing I'd want people to understand is everyone they would meet with at Sands & Associates, they'll be treated with dignity, with respect, and with empathy right as soon as they walk in the door.
Right.
Everybody is an individual. Everyone's got their own story, and I wouldn't be satisfied in my job if, my days were beating down people and making them feel worse.
Right.
They're already at a low point in their lives. What makes me really energized in what I do is seeing the transformation of people from the first meeting when they walk in, shoulders hunched, breathing shallowly, sweating, very anxious about what's going to happen to them,
right,
to even after that first meeting when they shake my hand, thank me for my time, and say, this was not what I thought. I feel like there's some hope again. I've had people say after the first meeting, they walk out and they're walking on air. They finally see there's some hope. There's some way they can move on with their lives that they didn't know was possible before.
How much does that first meeting cost?
Free.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It should never cost you money to figure out your financial options.
Oh, okay. What's the difference between a trustee, a person who's taken all the university accreditation and all the rest of it, a trustee in bankruptcy, or a proposal administrator? What's the difference between what you do and what a credit counselor does, Blair?
Well, there's a wide spectrum of credit counselors out there. There's some that are very reputable, that have offices, bricks and mortar. They've been around for a long time. What a credit counselor will typically do is help you work out full repayment of your debt.
Okay.
So they might be able to negotiate an interest freeze with the people you owe money to. They can't help you at all with income tax debt or student loans, which is something only a trustee can help you with.
Okay. All right.
But if you don't need to actually reduce the amount that you owe, you can pay everything off. You just need a little bit more time. That's when a credit counselor might be the right person for you to see. But there's a lot of people calling themselves credit counselors these days who are nothing of the sort.
And this is, I have to interrupt you here because I've just learned this, friends. in many Canadian provinces, and Blair and I are both originally from Ontario, where they have regulations to this effect. Next door in Alberta, perhaps the most regulations of any province in Canada with respect to who can and can't call themselves a credit counselor. Unlike our neighbors in Alberta, we here in British Columbia have virtually no regulation when it comes to someone hanging out a shingle saying, John Smith, credit counselor.
And the title I see even more is debt consultant or debt settlement advisor. Sometimes they do call themselves credit counselors,
Right.
but it's embarrassing for the province of BC to have zero protection for consumers when they're at one of their lowest points in their lives,
Yeah.
really looking for help. What's happened in the last couple of years, just to give a bit of history, there was a bunch of U.S. companies who were found to be acting fraudulently, and the federal government of the U.S. actually acted to outlaw their business practices. They were taking upfront fees, they were making unreasonable claims that were completely untrue about we can help you with your debts, it's a special government program, there's going to be no credit rating impact, so on and so forth, just pushing all of those hot buttons.
Yeah.
They were outlawed in the U.S., so they started to look to Canada. And it's been just a race. They hit Alberta, Alberta changed the regulations. They hit Manitoba.
So they slammed the door in their faces
Yep.
in Alberta. Well, good
Manitoba, Alberta, Nova Scotia, they all did that as well. I've been in touch with Consumer Protection BC. Nothing is happening. They're saying they don't have the authority to regulate these people because they're not actually handling your money. They're charging you money to advise you, to tell you to put money aside, to stop paying your creditors. All of these tactics that are just very, very low perspective of success and often just serve to bilk a person of their last few dollars and not give them any real help. So it really is buyer beware right now in BC.
So could that be one of the factors, Blair, that prevents people here in our own province of British Columbia from coming forward when they most need help, that they may figure they're going to get taken for a ride by some quasi-crook?
I think that that's the potential for it. I think, really most people don't know that this is happening and they don't know that these people are crooks until they've been through it.
Right.
So I'm seeing probably 1 or 2 clients a week, just myself, and we have a lot of other trustees, just what I see.
Well, you've got 10 offices. Of course you've got a lot of trustees.
Of course,
right.
yeah. So just the people that I see, they've worked with these people for 3 or 4 months. They've spent sometimes upwards of $3,000 on them. And then finally, at the end of the day, when the program doesn't work, they say, well, you need to go see a trustee. As we talked about, it's free to see a trustee right from the start.
Okay.
I could have helped these people and saved them that money if they had come to see me first.
Interesting.
So I think there's a bunch of folks out there, and it's unfortunate, who are in these programs right now and who are maybe getting a little bit uncertain when their creditors still keep calling them and the people told them they weren't going to call anymore. When they get notices they're being sued and the people told them they weren't going to be sued, there's really no legal protection. There's no legal basis for what these folks claim to do for you. It's a tragedy right now.
I'm really glad you popped by today, Blair. This is an important bit of information, particularly as you get on in life, you become less flexible. If you're, in your 20s and 30s and, you got unlimited possibilities, so you lose your job. The world's your oyster. You can move on. And the older you get, the more restricted you get in your ability to generate income, particularly. So then you have to be even more cautious. But then caution, we Canadians tend to err on the side of caution as a people. But then there's a point of being so cautious that you're literally digging yourself into a quite deep hole, isn't there?
Oh yeah, when you think, well, my only way out of this is to eventually pay these folks off, I guess that's the ultra cautious approach, is that I can't get advice from anybody. And one thing that I really saw that was a great change a couple of years ago was they forced credit card companies to put a special disclosure on the credit card statements. I don't know if you've noticed it, but at the end of your credit card statement, and sometimes it's in small print, it'll say if you only make the minimum payments, it's going to take you X number of years to pay off this debt.
Right, I've seen those.
I have people bringing those into me. It says 166 years, 175 years. So, regardless of whether you're 20 or 50 or 80, and I see all ages in between,
sure.
That starts to paint the picture as well. People sometimes think, well, as long as I'm making the minimum payments, eventually I'm going to get out of this hole that I'm in. But if it's going to be 50 years of making the minimum payments and you're going to pay back, 20 times what you originally borrowed, you got to think, is that the best way for me to move forward with my life? There's more to a person than just their financial health.
You're listening to Boomer Life here on AM 650. I'm Stirling Faux. Blair Mantin, Senior Vice President with Sands & Associates, is in studio. Their website, by the way, just a terrific place to learn. WeHelpWithDebt.com. They have a phone number, too, at 604-310-0911. All that information, though, Blair, it's on the website.
Exactly.
Just a great place to get started, especially if you're just kind of out there and you're all stressed out. Life is just a mess. People are calling you and making every day. You don't even want to answer the phone. You don't even open your mailbox. I mean, it gets to the point where you just go away, world. I've done my best, and I'm at my wit's end. And so what is the primary cause of the insolvency issues that you deal with British Columbians every day? Is it credit card debt, Blair, or are there other issues?
For the most part, it's your typical consumer debt. So it's the credit cards because, credit cards are the easiest credit to incur. And for a period of time, we had an age of very easy credit where, regardless of income, regardless of assets, and students are a great example of this. Anybody on a campus is getting a credit card these days.
Yeah, you're 19 and you got 3 credit card companies dying to cut you a piece of plastic. That's crazy. None of these kids can afford a credit card.
Yeah, no, exactly. So almost everybody I see, there's some component of consumer debt there. It might not be the primary cause. In some cases, there was a mortgage overextension.
Yes. Yeah.
They bought a bigger house than they could afford, thinking that the market was going to continue to go up. In some cases, the market has held strong, mostly in the downtown core, but I work a lot out in the valley, in Langley, Maple Ridge, Abbotsford, Chilliwack. The market's not holding strong
That's
there.
right.
So
It's a little softening going on, isn't there?
So I sometimes have families walking into me saying, I can barely carry the house, and I know if I sold it, I would lose $100,000 or something like that. In Canada, if you sell your house at a loss, you're responsible for paying that balance off. So it's not like in the U.S., you just walk away, you hand the bank back the keys, and you go on your merry way. In Canada, that debt will follow you.
Really?
And the only way to deal with that is either to pay it back, but if it's a massive amount, you're probably not going to be able to, or to consider a proposal or a personal bankruptcy.
Okay, we'll talk about the differences between a proposal, a consumer proposal, and personal bankruptcy in our next segment. But just before we take the break here, I'm looking for takeaway messages. And back to the point of selecting someone to try to help you out of this debt quandary you find yourself in. Is there a rule of thumb with respect to paying money? You've already said to sit down with a trustee in British Columbia is free, at least at Sands & Associates. Is that a legal thing in BC?
Every trustee that I'm aware of.
First meeting is free.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should never cost you money to understand your legal options for your debts. Full stop. If someone wants an upfront fee, run the other way. They're not looking out for your best interests.
Okay. Can we take that to one further step in terms of takeaway messages? If they want money up front, even for that first meeting, avoid like the plague. What about other payment schedules and stuff? Because you were talking about companies taking people for several $1,000s and doing absolutely nothing for them. So again, what are the warning signs? What I want to do is help people find their way to your door and not get ripped off along the way.
Another huge warning sign is, are you ever going to meet the person? A trustee cannot take a client's business unless you meet them face to face. You sit down across the table, eye to eye, and they understand that you are going to do your very best for them, and they're going to be honest. They're going to be honest right back to you as well.
Okay.
A lot of folks that are unscrupulous, you will never meet them. They're operating out of a call center, often in the U.S. You'll hear the accent. You'll wonder where they are. That's where they're from. So unless you can meet this person and they have a bricks and mortar office, that's a big risk factor as well. The last thing I would say is just, what happens if something goes wrong? How are these people regulated, and what is your recourse?
Right.
If you're dealing with a trustee, I'm regulated by the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. They grant my license and every other of the 1,000 trustees in Canada, so it's a pretty select group.
Sure.
I'm very protective of my license. If I do anything that is wrong, they can pull the license, which means I can't help clients and I can't be in business anymore.
Sure.
So I'm not going to be doing that.
Right.
If you're dealing with someone who's completely unregulated and you say...
in a foreign country.
Well, yeah, and you say, well, I don't feel like I got good service, I want my money back. I've had people who are dealing with me now try to do that. They get either very little of their money back or nothing back. There's really no one that they can complain to. And again, Consumer Protection BC doesn't seem to have the teeth to deal with these folks because they're not regulated by them.
Interesting stuff. Great information, too. Our guest in studio is Blair Mantin, Senior Vice President with Sands & Associates. And again, during the break, if you want to check out their website, you'll be surprised at how much information is at your fingertips when you hit We Help With Debt, obviously one word, wehelpwithdebt.com. We're back with more here on Boomer Life on AM 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on AM 650.